All right, so we've got to talk about what everyone's discussing online within the, I would say, niche Metroid community at least, and what's going on with Metroid Prime 4 Beyond and the sales numbers. Some people are saying, oh my gosh, it's a huge flop because Nintendo didn't announce that it sold 1 million units on their financial sales reports. We had articles jump the gun saying that they're off to slow starts. Even Nintendo Life with a Hyrule Warriors Age of Imprisonment is off to a slow start, even though it had already sold 1 million units plus. They ended up fixing it later, but that's beside the point. The point is that some people think that Metroid Prime 4 is not doing well based off of Nintendo not discussing the sales numbers. So I wanted to give you guys a bit of an update, some information that I've put together, and talking about it just in general, because people are confused on exactly how Nintendo counts the sales data. And to be honest, I made a few mistakes in my sales video as well. Nintendo does a couple of different things that's a bit weird. But before we get into all of that and some extra details on some other big games that were really impressive for the Nintendo Switch 2, please make sure you hit that subscribe button if you're someone new. I am giving away a Nintendo Switch 2 once we hit 150,000 subscribers, and we're getting new subs all the time. So hit that subscribe button, hit that like button, click that notification bell, and drop a comment below on what you think when it comes to Metroid Prime 4 after you hear what I have to say here. Okay, so let's talk about it, because Metroid Prime 4 Beyond, how Nintendo counts the sales for the quarter is that the game actually has to sell 1 million units per the platform. Now, Nintendo is not combining the sales of Metroid Prime 4 Beyond on Switch 1 and on Switch 2. They just don't combine them for their sales numbers or updates. So it's very much possible that the Nintendo Switch 1 version sold, like, let's just say 300,000 copies, and the Nintendo Switch 2 version sold like 800,000 copies. If that was the case, then of course it sold over 1 million units. Just Nintendo's not going to report it unless it hits that 1 million for the quarter, and that's how they've been for a very long time. That's just how they do it. Sometimes we get some extra data for the bigger selling games, but when it comes to just the games that maybe have sold, let's just say 2 million units total after a number of time or something, they just won't talk about it, and that's just how they record the numbers. So I did see quite a bit of misinformation online, people saying that it didn't sell 1 million because Nintendo didn't list it. That's not necessarily the case, because once again, they do not combine the Switch 1 and Switch 2 version. I also made a mistake saying with Pokemon Legends ZA that the Nintendo Switch 2 numbers that Nintendo reported at the 3.8 million or something like that was the Nintendo Switch 2 version, physical and digital. That is not true. All it is the physical version of it. Nintendo does not count digital versions, apparently, of the upgrade packs or the digital version of that for Switch 2 software. They count that as Switch 1 software. So I think that's why there was definitely some imbalance with the Pokemon Legends ZA sales being like 3.8 something for Switch 2 and like 8 million or so for Switch 1. A lot of that could be upgrade packs and the digital version of it that they're just counting as a Switch 1 game. So just keep that in mind as well, because what we do know when it comes to these sales numbers with Metroid Prime 4 is that it actually charted pretty good in the US MPD. Usually sales are more like Circana, they call it that now. The sales of Metroid games are usually pretty front-loaded as well, so I would expect it if you combine the Switch 1 and the Switch 2. I personally feel that it's probably over 1 million or right about that. That's where I guesstimated that the sales would be, right around 1 million, because it doesn't even have a month of sales data yet. The game came out on December 4th. The sales here are to December 31st, so it's not even one full month of sales data. So I'm guessing it's right around 1 million or a bit above that. Now we have a bit more extra added on here. Nintendo Prime gave his take in his video, so you guys can check that out. But he also talked about it a little bit on Twitter and gave an update on Kiwi Talks, who's a big Metroid guy, and apparently he's got his hands on some numbers of where he heard what the game sold so far. Paul Gale also kind of cut into it, so we'll get into what they had to say, or more like I'll abbreviate it. So on Twitter, Prime said, let's talk about the sales numbers, that Nintendo, obviously they did not report that it crossed 1 million units on Switch 1 or Switch 2, but they don't combine the sales data together, and they just haven't done that for a while. Now, Kiwi Talks apparently has reported that it did about 1.5 million units combined, although Nintendo Prime is not sure where he heard that or got the numbers from. Kiwi Talks does come to the channel every now and then on my live streams, and I can probably reach out to him, so I'll see where, maybe if he can tell me where he got those numbers from. But I would say, since he does have some inside contacts and stuff like that when it comes to Retro Studios, he interviews developers, I would guess that he's not just making that number up. up. I'm pretty sure you got that from a credible source. So if that's the case, 1.5 million, that seems about right for the Switch 1 and Switch 2 version. Like I stated, I guesstimated around 1 million or a bit above that. So I'm guessing that's where it's at based off the NPD charts, based off the eShop charts when it comes to Switch 2, and just the, I would say, hype of just the bulk of the small niche of Metroid fans that probably would go out there and buy it very quickly. Also, Paul Gale did some number crunching as well and pointed out the sales rate of Metroid Dread when it comes to the 85 days compared to the 27 days of Metroid Prime 4, and did a bit more of that in terms of how it could favor Metroid Prime 4. But either way, once again, it's one of those things to where we won't know until Nintendo says something, and if Nintendo never says something, then we'll just like never know. Nintendo's pretty transparent, or more like the most transparent with their numbers when it comes to different game sales, but when it comes to certain stuff like them just announcing sales numbers of a game, if it doesn't hit the metrics for them to announce it and how they're counting Switch 2 sales, that's just how it's going to be. When it comes to Microsoft and Sony, they barely give us any numbers. Most of the time, they don't give us anything really outside of, oh, this one game that came out here sold this. But they don't give us back sales numbers. They don't give us certain, like, hey, if it sells 1 million, we'll report it. They don't do any of that. Interesting to see when it comes to how Nintendo reports compared to the rest of the industry with sales numbers, or more like the rest of the console manufacturers, at least when it comes to sales numbers. So that is it when it comes to the Metroid Prime 4 Beyond sales update. My own personal opinion is that, yeah, I think that Metroid Prime 4 Beyond had a few different things working against it. Obviously, the development period of the game was rough, and I think that the reviews, I said this beforehand, that the reviews could definitely affect how this game does and how it branches out to other people, and I think that a lot of the negative reviews with this game did not help. But I do think that Metroid Prime 4 Beyond, as time goes on, I think more and more people will actually pick this game up as they get their Nintendo Switch 2. So I don't think that it's going to sell incredible. Obviously, Metroid is not an incredible selling franchise. The best selling game in the series is Metroid Dread with 3 million units plus, so I don't think it's going to sell something crazy, but I still feel that people are going to pick it up as time goes along. I think it can do decent for itself. Now, some people have asked, okay, well, does this mean that we're not going to get Metroid Prime 5? And it's one of those things to where you can't tell. Nintendo doesn't really make Metroid games because they sell incredible. That's just something that they just don't do. They just make them because it fills a certain niche, and they usually review pretty well, although they might be rethinking that with this game. But there was a number of factors why this game reviewed the way that it did, and if they were able, Retro Studios being able to actually create something from scratch in their own vision and take the feedback from Metroid Prime 4 Beyond, I think they can make Metroid Prime 5 significantly better than what we saw with Metroid Prime 4, with some of the issues with green crystals or Viola or the desert. I think they can craft something in their own vision and work from there. So I'm kind of like 50-50. I do think that Metroid Prime 5 will probably happen in the future. I don't think this is going to be the end of the series just because of this. And once again, we don't have the full sales numbers. According to what Kiwi Talk says and according to Paul Gale, they are estimating around, combined between Switch 1 and Switch 2, which Nintendo's not reporting, to be above 1 million units plus. Still might not be enough for that game considering the long development period and the cost that it takes to make a game like that. But once again, I'm not sure if Nintendo was making this game in order for it to sell crazy amounts of numbers. I think they really care more about the reviews and the quality of the game, but obviously that took a bit of a hit with Metroid Prime 4 Beyond. So maybe they give them one more shot to kind of adjust and don't blame this on them, considering they had to kind of take what the idea for Metroid Prime 4 was going to be, open world game, kind of like Breath of the Wild in some ways, then adapt that and cut that out and trim it into something different. So we'll see if Nintendo and Retro Studios end up doing something else. My bet is that they're going to take that engine, take that smoothness, take that gameplay, and just create something that's a bit more, I would say, straightforward as a Metroid Prime 1 experience, just so they can kind of get those reviews and hopefully get the sales around what Metroid Prime can do and faster. Because I think, once again, those review numbers were important when it comes to a game like this. And especially because the Nintendo Switch 2 just had so many games release in the past 6 months or so. The amount of releases were just crazy between Mario Kart World, Donkey Kong Bonanza, Pokemon Legends ZA, Hyrule Warriors Age of Imprisonment, Kirby Air Riders, and then Metroid Prime 4 Beyond. All of those games being $70 or even a bit more individually, with Mario Kart World being $80 if you didn't get it in the bundle. So I think that's kind of what happened there. But once again, we will see what happens with all of this. So what do you guys think about this Metroid Prime 4 Beyond sales update? Let me know in the comment section below. But now we are going to move on to some other big Nintendo Switch 2 games. There was a big media preview event in New York in addition to Europe, and it was pretty cool to see some of the upcoming big third-party games that Nintendo's going to be having on the platform run and look good. We've got Pragmata. We're going to start off with that, and apparently this game's running at a smooth 60 FPS according to some different videos that we have out here. Nintendo Act 2, they've talked about how it plays really well, runs smoothly. IGN's talked about it as well. Now there is a difference when it comes to the Xbox, PlayStation, PC version of Pragmata. You're going to be able to tell the hair isn't quite as good, some of the resolution isn't as high, but considering the Nintendo Switch 2 is a hybrid platform that you can take anywhere that you want, and obviously not as strong and cheaper than some of these bigger systems that are running it better, I think it's a net win for third-party games on the platform. Capcom is bringing that RE engine in all of its glory to the system, and this is exactly what the Nintendo Switch 2 needed. And the reason why Nintendo's actually doing this is because they want third-party games to go hand in hand with the first-party stuff, because they get a 30% cut from every single third-party game sold. And in years past, Nintendo's cuts from third-party games, obviously they make a lot of money and they do well because there's a lot of third-party games like on the Switch 1, for example. But if they can get that big third-party support that usually goes to PlayStation in Japan specifically and cut into that in certain markets like Europe and the US, that's going to be a huge business push and positive plus, and get more third-party developers to be excited to put their games on the platform because more people are going to be buying their game. So I do think that Capcom made the right call, made the right choice here, investing into Nintendo Switch 2 early and often, because we're seeing a number of their games run and look good with Pragmata. This is great to see. The previews have all been really good. The gameplay seems snappy and fun. Looks like a really cool and innovative type of shooter, third-person hybrid type of game. So very excited about that. Now the other game that I want to talk about here is Resident Evil Requiem, because we've also got new information and footage on that, and apparently people are excited about Resident Evil Requiem on the Nintendo Switch 2, saying that it runs and looks good. Once again, doesn't have the same fidelity as the PC or other consoles with the graphics in the game, but the fact that you can take that anywhere that you want is a big positive. The third-person plus first-person views also is a big positive when it comes to portable play, and I think will appeal to the Nintendo fan base as well, as many of them purchased a lot of copies of Resident Evil 4, Resident Evil 5, and Resident Evil 6 on the Nintendo Switch 1. Those games all sold well. People don't realize that. They try to think, oh, well, man, what's happening with Resident Evil? It's the first time coming back. Maybe fans don't know about it. That's just not the case. Like, so many people bought Resident Evil games on the Nintendo Switch 1. They were just waiting for them to put out the newer stuff. So I see Resident Evil Requiem doing pretty good on the Nintendo Switch 2 based off of the impressions that we're getting. It does seem like it's going to be docked 60 FPS, but portable mode 30 FPS, but I don't want to confirm anything when it comes to resolution or when it comes to frame rate at this point, because people are just going off of what they're looking at. We don't have any of the machines and the digital foundry stuff hooked up and tested. People are just going off of how they feel and how they think it looks. So we'll wait for all of that, but based off of just the eye test and what I can see and what other people are reporting on, it does seem like things are running fairly decent and consistent with both games, with minimal problems when it comes to resolution or frame rate. Everything seems to be locked in and smooth for the most part. So good news with both of these games. Nintendo needs these big AAA third-party games, Japanese titles in particular, to do well. I think that this is part of their strategy. You see the Nintendo Switch 2s dominating in Japan with these sales numbers, so you're going to have great software to supply when you don't have your big first-party games every single month. I think that this first half of the year, or this first quarter, I should say, is kind of like that. Nintendo had a big last half of the year with the launch and all the different first-party games. This time you have kind of like Mario Tennis, Pocopia. You got some games that are going to sell really well, but then you also have some of these hardcore games that can fill in the gaps for players out there. So that's why Pragmata, Resident Evil Requiem, a lot of these big third-party games, Final Fantasy VII Remake, Intergrade, these are all very important for the success of the system. And I've been saying this for a long time now with Japanese games. Like, they need to support Nintendo platforms. They're gonna see a good return on investment to get people interested and excited. Yes, first party is always going to be king, and I'm not trying to make any type of excuses or say, oh, well, third party is going to be way more important than first party. I mean, trust me, third party is super important, but Nintendo has to have those first party games. But you also need that big mix of games like this, like Resident Evil, like Pragmata, like Monster Hunter Stories, like Final Fantasy, all this stuff that they're getting early in the life of the system compared to the Switch 1 getting nowhere near as much. This is really valuable and is going to pay dividends later down the line as people decide what systems they're going to buy, as the economy isn't in the best shape right now. And so having more is better when it comes to your game library and lineup. So what do you guys think about everything we talked about here, from the Metroid Prime 4 Beyond sales update to the Capcom update with Pragmata and Resident Evil Requiem on the Nintendo Switch 2? Let me know in the comment section below. All right, guys, that wraps it up for this video here. Thank you so much for watching. I do appreciate it. Please make sure you hit that like button, subscribe if you're someone new, click that notification bell, and check out my other Nintendo Switch 2 RPG content and more right here on screen. Thanks for watching, and we'll catch you guys for the next one. Peace.